my friends. Welcome to another episode of Deep True Crime. I'm Manny Rodriguez. In today's episode, we are going to be discussing the timeline of the tragic Uvalde school shooting. We're going to go through the timeline. We're also going to share some of the mistakes that the Texas law enforcement made that could have helped stop this sooner. As news continues to come out, we continue to find out some tragic ways that this could have probably been prevented a little sooner, less lives lost. And let's be real, anytime children's lives are taken way too soon. And it's one of the most tragic things that could possibly occur because they are our future. And that's why I am wearing this sweatshirt today. You see, I recently bought this so that I can use on my stream when I'm talking about children because they are our future and we must protect them. As someone who had a very rough childhood, I can tell you those rough childhoods do affect you later on. We have to protect our future. Those children are our future. Let's go ahead and dive into the timeline that led up to a lot of this. The community in that Uvalde area, though everyone is heartbroken. We've had people die because of being heartbroken. One man lost his wife in this tragic incident. He didn't know how to live with it. He died of a broken heart. I didn't even know that was a thing. This is one of the most heartbreaking things, whether it's the Sandy Hook, whether it's, the movie theater shooting. These are terrible things. Whether you're an advocate for gun rights or an opponent against gun rights, I don't know. But what I do know is that guns do kill. They're not little pellets, right? These things, I am afraid of guns because of that one little mistake that can even end a life, because those things are very dangerous. And so we got to figure out, how can we make these schools safer? I mean, how many people are struggling to send their children to school nowadays because they are not safe? This is happening more than it should. And so here we have a community that is broken. They are tore up because of this senseless massacre that took the lives of 19 young children and 2 teachers. And so I want to share with you the timeline of what happened in this Uvalde, Texas school. And I want to share with you some of the measures that they may have been able to take to prevent such a horrible thing. So the Texas Department of Public Safety Director, Stephen McCraw, he laid out the most detailed breakdown that the public had received to date about the horror that unfolded in Robb Elementary School on May 24th. And he attempted to offer some answers about the way authorities had responded. And so we're going to be diving into that. And so among some of the details that we now know that a school officer drove right past the shooter, the 18-year-old Salvador Ramos. And this was while Ramos fired at the school. And then as many as 19 officers were inside the school more than 45 minutes before the suspect was killed. And we find out that the school district police chief decided not to breach the classroom where the shooter was. And we find out that a young girl from the class called 911 several times asking for police while authorities were right outside. And so here is the timeline of events. We're going to start in September of 2021. The shooter, Salvador Ramos, he asked his sister to help him buy a gun, and she flatly refused. He was in a group chat on Instagram, and in it, there was a February 28th discussion of the suspect being a school shooter. Red flag. On March 1st, the shooter had an Instagram chat with several other people in which he discussed buying a gun. 2 days later, there was another group chat in which someone said, Word on the street was that the suspect was buying a gun. That shooter suspect replied, "Just bought something," and he puts RN for right now. On March 14th, the shooter wrote in an Instagram post, 10 more days. Another user replies, "Are you going to shoot up a school or something?" And then the shooter replied, "No, and stop asking dumb questions and you'll see." On May 17th and May 20th, the shooter legally purchased 2 AR platform rifles at a local federal firearms licensee, and he also purchased 375 rounds of ammunition on May 18th. And apparently these purchases were made for his 18th birthday. He had this planned for a little while before going to the school and committing this mass shooting. He sent a series of chilling text messages to some stranger girl that he met online who barely knew him and even wondered why he kept texting her. And this was according to screenshots. And so when he messages her, she lives in Germany, and she said that she began chatting with the shooter on a social media app earlier this month. So he tells her that on Monday, May 23rd, he received a package of ammunition. This is according to her statement. And on Tuesday morning, the next day, Salvador calls the girl that lives in Germany and told her he loved her. Again, he barely knows her. He complained about his grandmother being on the phone with AT&T about his phone. And he texted her, "It's annoying." 6 minutes later, at 11:21 a.m., he texted the girl that lives in Germany, texted her and he said, "I just shot my grandma in her head." Seconds later, he said, "I'ma go shoot up a elementary school RN right now." Rest in peace to all those kids. Rest in peace. On Tuesday, May 24th, at 11:27 a.m., video shows an exterior door of Robb Elementary School, which is suspected to be where the shooter entered from. This door was propped open by a teacher. Not too sure why. Maybe they wanted to let some air in. They forgot about how tragic some of this stuff can be, and I get it. When my son was in high school, I would go to the school and you can see cop out there. I mean, and it's a safe school, but they know you never know what can go wrong. Just yesterday, as some of you guys know, I'm a coach for a high school. And just yesterday, I don't know the full story, but a lot of the kids, even middle school kids, were telling me about our high school where a student went into the school to fight the principal. And he was so much on drugs, he actually passed out in the gym. And of course, sheriff's office came, police came, and a lot of students were worried. They didn't know what was going on. Granted, it sounded like he just went there to fight the principal, but how did he get in? How did this angry former student get in? We have to play safer. We have to play safer in these schools. At 11:28, Salvador's vehicle crashes into a ditch near the school, and a teacher runs into a room to get a phone and returns to the exit door, which remains propped open. Salvador, he jumps out of the passenger side of the truck with a rifle and a bag, which officials later discovered was ammunition. 2 witnesses, meanwhile, who were at the funeral home across the street from the school, they hear the crash and go to see what happened. All of a sudden, Salvador starts firing at them. Both begin running away. 11:30 a.m., a teacher reemerges in a panic and apparently called 911. In a separate statement, the U.S. Marshal Service said it received a call for assistance at 11:30 a.m. from a Uvalde Police Department officer. 1 minute later, at 11:31, the suspect reaches the last row of vehicles at the school parking lot and begins shooting at the school. Patrol vehicles, they begin to arrive at the funeral home. There was no school resource officer that confronted the suspect outside the school. At first, officials had originally described that there was a resource officer. Coming to find out, there was not a resource officer at the front of the school. And so a school resource officer was not on scene, but heard the 911 call about a man with a gun, drives to the area and sped to the back of the school to a person he thought was a suspect, but was a teacher. In doing so, the school resource officer drives right by the suspect, who was hunkered down behind a vehicle, where he begins shooting at the school. At that time, multiple shots were fired by the suspect. 11:33 a.m., the shooter enters the school and begins shooting into a classroom, which is connected to a second class. And he shoots at least 100 rounds. 2 minutes later, 3 Uvalde Police Department officers enter through the same door as the suspect. Another 3 Uvalde police officers and county sheriff, they follow behind, for a total of 7 officers on scene. The 3 initial officers went directly to the class door, which was closed, and 2 of them received grazing wounds from the shooter, who began shooting at them. 2 minutes later, at 11:37 a.m., another 16 rounds are fired in the following minutes. 11:42, a source close to a teacher receives a text saying there was an active shooter on campus. 1 minute later, Robb Elementary announces on Facebook it's under a lockdown status due to gunshots in the area, adding that the students and staff are safe in the building. No, they were not. You can see the post by Robb Elementary School. It says Robb Elementary is under a lockdown status. Robb Elementary parents, please know at this time, Robb Elementary is under a lockdown status due to gunshots in the area. The students and staff are safe in the building. The building is secure in a lockdown status. Your cooperation is needed at this time by not visiting the campus. As soon as the lockdown status is lifted, you will be notified. As you know, the students and staff were not safe in that building. Human error, probably, obviously. Stuff happens, but oh my gosh. Roughly 11:44 a.m., officers are calling for additional resources, equipment, body armor, negotiators, and evacuating students and teacher. 11:51, more officers arrive on scene. At 12:03 p.m., now it's the afternoon, officers continue to arrive in the hallway of the school. There's as many as 19 officers at that time in that hallway. At that same time, right around 12:03 p.m., a young girl from inside of the adjoining classrooms calls 911 and identifies herself and whispers the classroom she is in. The call lasted 1 minute and 23 seconds. She calls back several minutes later, says multiple people are dead. 12:10 p.m., the first group of deputy U.S. Marshals arrive on scene to assist federal, state, and local law enforcement that were already on the scene. 12:13 p.m., the girl calls 911 again. 2 minutes later, members of the Border Patrol's tactical unit, they arrive on scene as well. When Border Patrol agents began to arrive, the officer in charge of the situation had already made the determination that it was a barricaded subject situation. The team then waited, not breaching the classroom where the shooter was holed up, until nearly 40 minutes later. Now, the Texas Department of Public Safety Director Stephen McCraw, he said that the person who made the decision was the school district police chief. And Stephen McCraw, he said it was the wrong decision not to engage with the gunman shooter. 21 lives later, isn't that the obvious? At 12:17 p.m., Robb Elementary announces on Facebook that there is an active shooter at the school and authorities are on the scene. And you can see, it says right here, May 24th at 12:17 p.m., there is an active shooter at Robb Elementary. Law enforcement is on site. Your cooperation is needed at this time by not visiting the campus. As soon as more information is gathered, it will be shared. The rest of the district is under a secure status. That was the post from Robb Elementary at 12:17 p.m. Now, a minute earlier, the girl calls 911 again and tells dispatchers there are 8 to 9 students alive. At 12:19 p.m., another person calls 911 from one of the 2 classrooms and hangs up when another student tells her to hang up. At 12:21, the suspect fires again. He was believed to be at the door. Now, at this time, law enforcement is moving down the hallway, and then 3 shots fired are heard from another 911 call that was made. At 12:36 p.m., the initial student who calls 911, she calls again, and she is told to be very quiet and tells dispatchers he shot the door. And this call lasted 21 seconds. At 12:43, the young girl asks dispatchers to please send the police now. At 12:47 p.m., the student asked for police again. A minute earlier, she had said she could hear the police next door. In her mind, why aren't we free yet? 12:50, law enforcement breach the locked classroom door using the keys from the janitor. They shoot and kill the suspect. 12:51 p.m. Through the young girl's 911 call, there are loud noises and officers can be heard moving children out of the room. The child goes outside and the call is cut off. The suspect purchased and had a total of 1,657 total rounds of ammunition. At least 315 of them were inside the school, and 142 of them were spent cartridges. That is the timeline of this tragic event. Now let's dive a little deeper, because our focus of this channel is how can we prevent more of this stuff from not happening. We would prefer that it doesn't happen, but why do people have these sick moments? I don't know. I'm not perfect. I just know I'm not capable of that craziness. And so that's the whole purpose of this channel, is like, how could this have been prevented? I don't know. But let's talk about what went wrong in this school massacre. Because when the Texas Department of Public Safety, Stephen McGraw, spoke, he even said there were numerous points where the shooter could have been stopped. But the massacre continued for various reasons. And we want to dive into some of that was going on. First things first, as I mentioned, that door being left open. This allowed the gunman to enter the school. That's a big mistake right there. You know, I get it. After things die out, Sandy's school shooting was many years ago, right now they're at their most alarmedness, right? It just happened. What happens in a year, 2 years, 3 years? You get complacent, you get comfortable. These are our children. Every single moment has to be protecting them. This should have never happened. How could someone have this much anger in them? I don't know. That's not for me to get into, because that's not what this is about. And so that was the first mistake. That door should not have been left open at 11:27 a.m. that Tuesday morning. The teacher at Robb Elementary School propped open a door to the building. We don't know why that door was propped open. Thought process is they wanted some air through there. That's just a thought. 1 minute after that, that's when the gunman crashed a vehicle into a ditch nearby the school. Stephen McCraw, he says that back door was propped open. It wasn't supposed to be propped open. It was supposed to be locked. And certainly the teacher that went back for her cell phone, they propped it open again. So that was an access point that the subject used. how did he know that that would be open? Is that something that they do regularly? Because from my understanding, he went to that school or something. He was upset that he didn't graduate. The next mistake, the officer drives right by the suspect. There was not a school resource officer at the school when the shooter arrived. Where was he? I'm curious to know where he was. You see, Uvalde alone has a part-time SWAT team, and the Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District has 6 officers. Where were they? So a resource officer who was not on campus hears the 911 call of a man with a gun, and he drives immediately to the school. Guess what? On his way there, the officer sped to what he thought was the man with a gun near the back of the school, but it turned out to be a teacher. In that process, he drives right by the shooter as the shooter was hunkered down behind a vehicle where he began shooting at the school. And another thing is that officers were close enough to the suspect to be wounded, but rampage continued. You see, 2 of the initial 3 officers that went directly to the door, they received grazing wounds from the suspect while the door was closed. I mean, they were so close there to get grazed. Why didn't they just take them out at that moment? That's just a guess there. Who knows how many kids died after that? I don't know if anyone was dead yet. And then why wasn't there an immediate effort to break through that locked door? You see, the doors to the 2 adjoining classrooms were locked at that time, and no efforts were made to open the doors. Why? Come to find out that the on-scene commander at the time believed that it had transitioned from an active shooter to a barricaded subject, meaning that he barricaded himself in there. Maybe they thought he was alone. Maybe they thought he was holding them as hostage, but does not look that way at all. And that's the thing, is that while they thought this was a barricaded subject situation, that was the time to retrieve the keys to the door and wait for a tactical team with the equipment to go ahead and breach the door and take on the subject at that point. And that's the thing. For some reason, they thought it was a barricaded subject instead of he was still an active shooter. And that's the thing, there were children in the classroom that were at risk. In fact, it was an active shooter. It wasn't a barricaded situation. There should have been more done at that very moment. Where did the disconnect come from? There should have definitely been entry at that moment, because in an active shooter situation, officers are not required to wait on tactical gear. Stephen McCraw, he says, if shooting continues and you have any reason to believe there's individuals alive in there, you've got an obligation to move back to an active shooter posture, and that means everybody at the door. Then you had these 911 calls from the classroom that didn't even change the police response. You see, officers, they were moving down the hallway at 12:21 p.m. But they didn't breach the door until 12:50. 29 minutes later. 29 minutes. 29 minutes! In that same time, several more 911 calls came in from people inside the 2 classrooms. And you see, at 12:19 p.m., someone in the adjoining room 111, remember I shared that she called the police and hung up when another student told her to hang up. At 12:21, you could hear over the 911 call that 3 shots were fired. What were they waiting for? Let me see. At the end, they just put in a key, they turn it, they kill him. Why did it take so long? I don't get that. Because even at 12:36, a student, another child, calls 911 and said he shot the door. At 12:43 and 12:47, she asked 911 to please send the police now. The next problem is officers waited to retrieve the keys from the janitor. They waited. What are they, courteous now? Their lives at danger. These lives are at stake here. And so the officers breached the door at 12:50 p.m. 50. And so when they finally breached the door at 12:50 after they were waiting to retrieve the keys, that's when the officers killed Salvador Ramos. There were 35 spent law enforcement cartridges in the school. 8 were in the hallway. 27 were in the classroom where the gunman was killed. And in the midst of the incident, neighbors and parents were screaming and pleaded with officers to go into the school and save the children. And so then questions began to come out about the gunman and the other access point. You know, one reporter even asked Stephen McCraw if law enforcement could have shot into the classrooms the shooter was in from the outside, as opposed to focusing on entering through the locked doors along the hallway. And McCraw, he said, as for if someone could have shot opposite in that regard, I don't have the answer to that. Keep in mind, you've got children in here. There's other access points as well. But ultimately, they were able to get a key, go in, kill him, and apparently not kill any of the other kids. Why didn't that happen sooner? That's what I don't get. Why didn't that happen sooner? So could this have been prevented or less deaths prevented? No one's perfect. Law enforcement has a duty to protect. They have to be prepared for these situations. They have to be ready at all times for the situation. Help me understand why there wasn't a resource officer outside of that school protecting. Did they get too relaxed and believe this could not happen to us? Like, I want to know why these kids were not protected more. You probably want those same answers. What are some of the questions you have? Let me know in the comments what are some of the questions that you have about this case. So, my friends, now you know the timeline. Now you know some of the mistakes that were made that could have probably had this killer sooner than later. We must protect our children. They are our future. My friends, I'm Manny Rodriguez. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you got some value from this. Please click that like button so more people can see this, because at the end of the day, my whole focus, keep you aware of what could go wrong so that we could be a little more alert and prepared. And this is probably why a lot more kids or a lot more parents are homeschooling their kids. You know, sure, there's some pros and cons to that, but look at what happens when you send your child to school. You either got to deal with bullying at school. The kids have to deal with bullying, which really tears them up, changes their personality, really alters their future in many ways, okay? So we have to protect our children. Please be alert, be aware, be careful, and care about our future. Those kids are our future. Rest in peace to those 19 young children and those 2 teachers taken from this world way too soon by this mad man who I guess hated life. I don't understand it. My friends, please protect your child. Protect other people's child. They are innocent. Sure, they may do their own mess ups, as we all do when we're growing up and learning and whatnot, but they deserve protection. Thank you for joining me today. My friends, I look forward to serving you again. Peace.